Good day, fair listeners. This is Reanimated podcast. We're up in episode 234 range. I am Stuart. I'm one of your hosts. On the other side of the country is our resident amateur epidemiologist and scaremonger, H.A. Conrad.
I'm here. But I'm not a scaremonger. I'm being realistic.
Yes. A pragmatic scaremonger in the form of H.A. Conrad. We've got lots of great news about the coronavirus to share.
I mean,
it came up yesterday. For me, it came up yesterday at a 4-year-old birthday party. So clearly, I might have brought it up, to be fair. But it's out there, man. It's the zeitgeist. People are talking about it, especially on the West Coast, because we have way more to lose than you do over there, safe and sound in New York, where nothing ever goes wrong.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So why don't we start with the coronavirus? We do have some other news, but this is the most real thing.
So as of today, the official death toll is at 56, and then the confirmed number of cases is at 1975. I'm suspecting it's probably more than that just because of the longer incubation period. Wuhan and a couple other places are in lockdown, and there's kind of terrifying footage of what's going on there because they apparently, look, if you're in those cities, I'm sure it's terrifying, and there's been a run on supplies and that kind of thing, things you would expect if this kind of thing was going down in a population center that's larger than New York, which it is. So that's, and they just don't have enough medical supplies to kind of deal with everything. The one thing that I'm, taking a little bit of heart with is that, like, in comparison to, say, the flu virus, it's not like, this is not at the level thus far in terms of like mortality rate and in terms of like severity as, say, SARS or MERS. So hopefully that's going to continue to be the case. But the concerning thing about it is that it's spreading it has a pretty high transmission rate at this point. And it seems as if people who don't exhibit symptoms are very capable of spreading it along. So that's a little concerning. I also pointed out, which is, your fear-mongering comment, that the U.S. is evacuating, has basically offered to evacuate embassy folks and apparently some U.S. citizens that are in Wuhan, and they're bringing them to your neck of the woods, Stuart. They're bringing them to San Francisco. And they're like,
Perfect.
yeah, and we'll have a doctor on the plane, for anybody exhibiting symptoms. And it's sort of like, well, you're going to let a bunch of people from the quarantine zone out into the wild if they're not, because clearly if they're not exhibiting symptoms, they could still be spreading it. So hopefully they're dealing with that. But it's not just the U.S. The UK and France are also doing such evacuations, and it's sort of like, well, I don't know how this contains the spread. So I don't know. It's a little worrying.
What do we know about the age or like relative medical insecurity of those fatalities?
Well, so the majority of people who have died from this have been older men, some with over the age of 50, with and it seems as if many of them have had previous health issues. What those issues are, they're not saying. So there is some vulnerability, I'd say, in that population. But there have been mortality, there have been deaths as young as, I think, 35. And then, one of the people I think recently that caught the headlines and whatever was an ENT, and he was retired, but basically went to the hospital to help, and he just died, I think, later this week. So, which is pretty quick, like if he's been he's been helping. So so again, I think there's more to learn about it. I think China's reaction, which is like, we need help, is a little weird. And meaning, like, they don't usually ask for help, so that kind of tells you what the severity might be.
Yeah.
And look, maybe it's that they learned from things like SARS and other things, but I just think I don't think people should panic yet, but I do think it's something to keep an eye on. And again, they think that it's sort of like, we've all seen, or most of us have seen, the movie Contagion, and the sort of source of the virus, both for SARS and for this, was basically the live food market, or it's a food market where they trade in live animals or illegal animals sometimes, so like civets and snakes and all sorts of things.
I feel like in Contagion, there wasn't even anything illegal going on. It was like a bat bit a pig,
Yeah.
and then the pig ended up in this kitchen in Macau, and then the
Right.
chef didn't wash his hands. That was the only
That
problem.
was the only problem. But in this case, they're basically trading in illegal animals. And I actually was like, oh, I don't know that I want to know all these animals that they're trading in because it sounds terrifying. But apparently, their best guess is that this has been passed along from snakes, either a cobra or a Chinese crate. And what they think is that the snakes basically bit bats or something like that. And so they think that may be where this has started. So anyway, that's...
Poor bats. Poor misunderstood, cuddly little bats.
Yep. So I will say some of the footage of the shutdown cities is pretty, like, 28 days later looking. So it's a little scary. But...
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some really bad fuzzy cell phone footage of like people crawling on the sidewalks in Wuhan,
I don't know if that's real.
Crowded hospital hallways. Yeah, I don't know if any of it's real, but it's talk about fear mongering. Like some of the tabloid newspapers are definitely taking this and running with it. Yeah.
But we'll keep tracking this, and I would say, like, look, on the positive side, they've been able to map this. And they're at least trying to keep the spread down. So, look, I think it's too early for people to go nuts about it. But interestingly enough, though, I've seen that... so I have friends who have a lot of friends in China, and they've been sending over, like, the masks and stuff like that. And I guess there's a run on those for obvious reasons. And they're all out, I guess, on Amazon or those kinds of things. So... let's hope for a quick resolution. But I think we'll obviously be talking about this probably for the next couple of weeks anyway, hopefully less.
Yeah. And one final point I'd like to make just in terms of context is, 57,000 people died from the flu in the 2018-2019 flu season just last year, let alone this year, which was, I think, I don't actually know if this one was worse, but it certainly hit our family worse.
Yeah. And
so when you look at those sorts of figures, and this is every year we're looking at that kind of loss of life just in the U.S. 50 so far. I know we're still early days for this thing, but it's no flu.
Well, I will say, the thing about the flu is that nobody ever remembers how lethal it is, and it's pretty freaking lethal. So, so anyway, we're tracking this with some.
Got our best reporters on the case.
Yeah. But let's put the serious stuff aside and jump into some of the other news we've got about more like fun things to talk about.
So first stupid piece of news is somebody tweets to Robert Kirkman, "Oh hey, what was the cause of the whole zombie apocalypse?" And he responds with 2 words, and those words are space spore, period. Which has then exploded into a million articles.
Well, look, I think he basically all along has said it doesn't really matter what the sort of start of it was. I feel like he's thrown around this theory at one point or another in jest, and that may be just what this is. I think he likes, like, riling people up, honestly. But basically his whole thing has been, it doesn't matter what caused it because it wouldn't matter to the people having to deal with it. It's not like we can wrap this up into, like, just this whole cure thing. So he basically has played with people with this thing all along. So, but I did enjoy how many articles basically, like, happened just because of this one little tweet. So it's kind of funny.
Yep. So yeah, that kind of threw a lot of people off into the deep end. And then I knew a bunch of, there's also the Zack Snyder thing. I'm trying to remember what the details are of that. Do you recall?
Yes. So basically, we've talked about this before because, it's the whole Army of the Dead. And this is, he's been on a bit of a hiatus. He had a lot of tragedy going on. He lost his son. I thought it was his son. Maybe it's his daughter. But he lost one of his children to suicide, which is part of why he took a step back from some of the Marvel movies. This has been sort of teased in various places, but he, everybody remembers that he did the remake of Dawn of the Dead, and so he's coming back with this one. It looks all right, but again, Zack Snyder is a bit of, he's more about visuals and that kind of thing than script and story. So we'll see what happens. But I'm cool with him making horror films. I'm all right with that. So let's see what this does. But it looks pretty cool.
It's got a pretty an interesting looking cast.
Yeah.
Dave Bautista is kind of headlining, but you've also got Theo Rossi from Sons of Anarchy, Chris D'Elia from, I'm not sure what I've seen him in other than At Midnight, the Chris Hardwick comedy show. From Garrett Dillahunt is in this. A lot of people. Awesome. It's got some interesting looking poster art. We have previously talked about this having needing a grain of salt because he's basically had no editorial limits put on him. It's kind of his own thing, and he doesn't have a great track record with that film that you had cited before, Jawbreaker, I think.
No. It's Sucker Punch.
Sucker Punch.
Yeah. Look, I have often said, I think from a visual point of view, he's got a lot of interesting things going on. He makes some interesting decisions, and I like some of the decisions he's made. Watchmen had some sort of like cell for cell, the film rather, cell for cell like accuracy, and I think he did a great job with certain portions of that. But he doesn't get the bigger picture, and I feel like he works so much better having a creative team working in tandem with him and reining him in a little bit. So we'll see what happens with this. He has no reins on this one, so it's all him. So we'll see what happens, and maybe it'll be good, but I don't know. I'm gonna let's reserve our judgment until we actually get to watch it.
What's the expected release for that?
They didn't really give one, and they've been teasing this for a little while, so I think it's sometime in 2020 supposedly, and that's like but this is the thing, the budget for this film is like $90 million. So it's not like it's like they have like unlimited. That's a pretty large budget for this kind of thing, but to not even have a release date yet is kind of interesting. So we'll see what happens.
Apparently Netflix took the project from Warner Brothers and I think was projected to begin filming in 2019, so it could still be out for a while.
Yeah, but Netflix, so we'll see. Sometimes this kind of thing happens and they just totally like drop this into something, and then you're like, oh wow, that's there. So we'll see what happens. And I'm sure we'll review it once it comes out.
And we will indeed. Now there's 3 new projects that are new to me anyway. I think they were all billed as 2020 projects. First one up is Dead Earth, which is kind of like, so it's about 2 ladies who sit around in bikinis and go swimming, but it's also about zombies. Mm-hmm. That's kind of all I was able to glean from the trailer.
Yeah,
it seems like it's an English language film, but maybe not made in an English language country. What was your take?
That's what it kind of feels like. They're apparently in some kind of a resort town, or an abandoned resort. And they kind of have to, once this place that they are runs out of stuff, they have to kind of go into the land, like go out and find more supplies and that kind of thing. Apparently this is in Thailand, or it was filmed in Thailand, so that seems about right. Yeah,
that feels right.
But I don't know if it's supposed to be set in Thailand. I just know it was filmed there, so we'll see. But I'm definitely happy to look at it. But again, you can't really get too much out of it, like in terms of what it's going to be about. But anyhow, but it's supposed to be out like this week, so we'll see what happens.
Okay, yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that, and it's definitely going on the list. The next one up, next trailer, and all these are in the show notes, was Alone. It's a guy kind of stuck in a penthouse during the zombie apocalypse, and very strong vibes of that film we saw, the French one. What was that called?
Oh, goodness. But the one that lots of people didn't like because it was just showing is it The Night Eats the World?
Night Eats the World. Yep. Good job.
But the one where the guy's like caught in this apartment complex, and it got panned a little bit because people were like, "Oh, this is so
Unoriginal."
boring." But you and I really liked it because it showed
Yeah.
a lot of the things that we want to know what
It
happens. During
showed
this
what
kind
happens
of thing.
when an obsessive compulsive ends up in the zombie apocalypse. Yeah.
But this has some very similar vibes to that. But clearly a few more survivals, and they managed to get Donald Sutherland to be in this.
Yes.
Which I was like, whoa, that's interesting. So
And he
I
shows
am
up kind of late
curious.
in the trailer, and I hadn't looked at there was a hashtag in the YouTube link there, but I didn't notice it until suddenly I was like, wait, whoa, Donald Sutherland. This felt low
Yeah.
budget until this
Well,
point, but
well, and I suspect he's probably not in it for very long. Just a thought.
he's there to provide some motivation for the hero.
Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe. But anyway, I'm curious. I'll watch this. I'm kind of excited to see this.
for sure.
And so we'll be reviewing this. I didn't see when this was actually supposed to be released. I think it's like, I don't know. It's still sort of, it looks like it's still up in the air. It's just got a 2020 on it so far that I could
Yeah.
find.
I don't.
So,
Yeah.
but they are going, I mean, the fact that this is a pretty detailed trailer, so I suspect maybe it's going to be reviewed soon, maybe. And it had about a $4 million budget to work with. So that's, not insanely high.
But they stuck in an apartment building for most
Yep.
of that, so
Yeah,
should be able to make
yeah.
it work.
Yep. All right. And then last up was something that caught me by surprise. I had not heard of this. And in fact, one of our friends who we have coffee with every weekend said, "Oh, are you going to go and see Zombie Child?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Stuart and I haven't talked about this. And it is apparently going to be on a limited release, I suspect, in some of the more artsy theaters because it's a subtitled film. It looks like a French film or a Haitian film. And it is... it looks, I mean, the trail, it combines two things that I'm terrified of: zombies and children. So there's that. It was just released apparently this past week. And I'm going to try to see it in the theater here in New York. But I think you might be able to actually watch it online too. So we'll see what happens. But this is a schoolgirl tale. It involves more of the Haitian zombie variety. And it is by French director Bertrand Bonello.
Yeah, definitely feels like it's going to go more into the Serpent and the Rainbow sort of territory than anything else that we would usually talk about. But I'm excited to see something that's a little more traditional voodoo zombie. So let's check it out. Like, there's definitely one scene in the trailer that makes you think, yeah, this is going supernatural. It's not staying in like the human, in the realistic realm.
Yep, and I will say I skimmed the review that was in the New York Times because I didn't really want to destroy too much of it. And the trailer's pretty intense, but it's so far it is getting pretty positive reviews overall. So we shall see.
Indeed. I think it looks really interesting, and it very different from everything else that we've been talking about for years, basically. So that is out there too. So Dead Earth, Alone, and Zombie Child, all out there. I love it when we get like a menu offering for the coming year of like projects that are out there, because it's very exciting. We have a lot to look forward to in 2020, kind of like we did in 2019, and we enjoyed almost everything that we got to see, with only a few exceptions like Patient Zero and I don't know
so
which
bad.
others.
Anyway. Well, without further ado, let us finish our recap of ZOMBOAT. And this is the series we started reviewing last time. This is the last 3 episodes, episodes 3 through 5 or 6? 5.
6.
No,
it's actually, sorry, it's 4 through 6.
4 through 6.
I don't do math.
In any case, it wraps up this series. I have to admit, I very much enjoyed this whole thing. It's kind of silly, but it was an enjoyable romp, in my opinion.
I mean, made easy to watch because of its short duration, each episode only being 25, 26 minutes. It could, if they'd tried to go longer, it wouldn't have worked. So they made some good decisions, and just the production process.
Right, and I think they also kept it on the lighter side in terms of how they were dealing with the content.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like it's not dark, but it's still it's lighter and funnier than you would, and it's good that they did that, in my opinion.
This first episode we're talking about, 4, I forget if it has a name, but the supermarket episode, it actually has a pretty good jump scare, and it explores Sunny's fear of the dark, and
Yep.
you can, there's actually it's a little scary, this episode, where generally this show has not been at all. I mean, you're kind of like, oh, I hope those zombies don't get them, but you're never actually like, ugh. But when Sunny is freaking out in the dark on his own in the canal boat, and he's like turning on a flashlight and looking out windows, you're like, oh, this is gonna go so bad.
Yeah, and it's also very much pulling from a 28 Days Later point of view. It's like shamelessly pulling from it. But basically, this is just to bring us back to where we started last time. The trio had gotten out of the hotel successfully, parted ways with the 2 bachelor friends that survived from Sunny and Amar's bachelor weekend, a bachelor party weekend. And so then we've got Sunny, Amar, Kat, and Joe heading off on the boat again. And they end up in, there's 2 things that they totally do from like a 28 Days Later point of view. They do a little blockade of grocery carts. And that's also from Dawn of the Dead too, I think. It's like shopping carts, so they're kind of blocking off the zombies in that way. But the canal is sort of draining, and that's causing some anxiety. They want to get more food and supplies from the grocery store that Joe used to work at. So Joe and Amar go off to get some supplies.
We've also got some stuff that we didn't get to see that they are like recovering from last night.
So I was going to say Kat and Sunny are left in the boat, but basically they all were drinking tequila.
Actually, no, that's the next episode, right? Because this is the episode where they go to get the tequila, and it's the next one.
Yeah. It's the next one where they do that.
Yeah.
So anyway,
we're still just dealing with the latent sexual tension between Sunny and Kat, I guess, in this episode, where they're like kind of flirting, but also yelling at each other for being lazy.
Yeah. And they basically, Joe and Amar set off. Again, they're kind of an unlikely pair to go and trust to do anything because they both seem a little bit flaky. And it seems like every time they go off, nothing good happens from it.
Speaking of like coupling, though, the first episode, it seemed like Amar was trying to impress Joe.
Yeah.
But I don't really get any vibes anymore between the two of them. Ever since their like moment in the car where he was telling her that she could get over her ex-boyfriend.
Mm-hmm. No, there's definitely not that vibe at all, which I kind of like. I like that they're not trying to ship everybody in this.
Well, it turns out it's for Amar's best interest.
Yeah. So Joe and Amar head into this supermarket, and they end up getting locked in. And it turns out Joe used to work there, and the woman who is working there is all like, her name's Chloe, and she's like very much a fan of Joe's, like follows her Instagram and all this stuff. And it comes to light that Joe had won this sweepstakes thing by like, I don't know, most items checked or something like that.
23.
Yep. So there's like stuff in the grocery market. They're relatively safe, except that there's definitely some zombies locked up somewhere in there. And it's an interesting set piece because they have all these supplies and ultimately don't get to take all that many of them with them. So
it's super not safe in there. Like, clearly the manager is just in the bathroom, and the only reason he hasn't come out is because he just was being like dormant or whatever.
Yeah, maybe.
So I'm surprised that Chloe manages. I mean, if we're talking like Walking Dead, of course they do plot holes as well as anybody else. This would not be a survivable scenario. I mean, she's managed to trap a few of them behind some empty cardboard boxes, which is also very, very sketchy. So, this episode, at least the supermarket setup, does not win any points for realism.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I don't think it's, as I said, like, I think they're trying to keep things light, and this is one of those things. It's like, all right,
I feel like you can marry the two, but yes.
Oh, so we've got Kat and Sunny left on the boat, and in part, I think Sunny's going off because there is tension between them, and she's uncomfortable with it. But also, this reveals a bit about Sunny in that he is terribly afraid of the dark. He reveals that he got left on some kind of scouting expedition in this mine or something like that.
Like on a school trip.
Yeah.
This is honestly the funniest scene in this whole episode is Kat's response when he's like, the coach, they didn't even know I wasn't on the bus till they got back to London. Do you know how long it takes to get from Cornwall to London? And Kat looks at him and like raises her eyebrows. She's like, 3.5, 4? It's just, so yeah, he wasn't down there. I mean, he was down there for maybe a day, and that's a long time to be in the dark, and you could probably go completely insane. So
as a kid, yeah.
But obviously, Kat is not feeling a great deal of sympathy for poor Sunny in this scenario, because also she's just like, look, night is just basically day with it's a bit darker or something. I forget what it is that she says that he's like, that's preposterous, but then he's actually kind of repeating that mantra to himself later on, and when he does venture outside.
Well, and she specifically tells him not to use the flashlight because that will attract all the zombies.
Or the lights on the canal boat, which he does turn on, and which is I think what does basically summon bikers and other zombies that end up coming after him.
Yeah, so anyway, she goes off to the supermarket and ultimately gets locked in with the other two. And, hilarity ensues. We get Chloe's sad disillusionment with Joe because she finds out that Joe cheated. And this is all Kat's fault because Kat is the one, she was mad because apparently Joe had been talking about her weird gothy sister. Mm-hmm. And Chloe was talking about how funny everybody thought that was. So
this isn't Kat's fault. This is Joe reaping what she sows.
It is, but it's also like Kat. But ultimately, it affects Kat, so it's sort of unfair because
And don't trust random Chloes that you meet in supermarkets in the apocalypse.
Well, and let's also say Chloe seems unbalanced, so I wouldn't be sharing any information with this person.
The way she goes after her boss is clearly like not. I mean, you don't have to stab a zombie 20 times,
right,
guys? Although
so
Rick has been known to do that too.
Yeah, that's true. So we've got like all that kind of dynamics in the grocery market. Ultimately Sunny ends up coming after them because he's terrified because he has attracted the zombies on the boat. And so he comes and runs for help. And he's ultimately the one who rescues them all out of the supermarket.
I mean, by rescue, you mean he walked up to the door and it opened and they all ran outside. But yes,
But before that, Chloe had actually gotten out because she had the manager's key or whatever, and she locked them in again because of Joe's betrayal of basically. And
here you have your like moral relativism lesson where Joe is beating herself up. She's like, oh, that's my fault that happened. I betrayed Chloe, and Kat has to be like, Chloe tried to murder not just you, but me and Amar along with you for that crime of cheating on a checkout competition. So actually, I think she's the worst person in this scenario.
And slight overreaction to that kind of news. And again, unbalanced. And then the group sails on.
But they escape with like, I don't know, two plastic bags of stuff, and it turns out that most of it's booze.
Yeah.
Which is
mainly due to Joe. And I'm like, again, the last thing I want to be doing, I mean, unless you're in a super safe place, I don't know that getting drunk during a zombie apocalypse is the smartest thing, especially if you're driving a boat.
And they've already established that when the boat is not being piloted or the engine turns off, they basically just come to rest against the shore at some point.
Right.
So yes, bad. They don't ever like really explore that. That would be more of something you would do in a serious horror film or show, but in this one, they at least toy with the idea enough that it's a little bit scary. In fact, like when they do come to rest against the shore at the beginning of this episode, they're like, wait, we're not moving and we've come to drift against the shore. And they all run outside and there's nobody there. And Sunny, I think, is the one who goes, oh, usually that doesn't go so well.
Right. And also, just as a reminder, throughout these episodes, Zombie Jude is still tracking them. So we get like a couple flashes to him. Yeah. And people are like, what's wrong with him? So that's obviously going to be a plot
entourage
point.
Of the other 5 zombies. Mm-hmm. He's also, is it this episode that he seems to be moving faster than the other ones?
I think it might be the next one.
Yeah.
But it's, so, and they note this. So these are not it's kind of by luck that this group is still alive, honestly.
Well, yeah. But luck and the fact that Kat is an encyclopedia of zombie and film knowledge.
And but she obviously, like, even she says to Joe and others that she doesn't really drink that much. So the aftermath of the tequila drinking, she's talking about a moment or more moments, I guess, that happened between her and Sonny.
Yeah, apparently they snog, which I think can mean a few different things, but in this case it just means they made out.
Right.
And there was some hand stuff.
And she was very worried that they had slept together, and she didn't remember because and this is true, horror films, usually the woman who has sex in the film dies. Yeah. So she was very concerned about this. And both of them are super awkward. Sonny especially, like, Amar applies that Sonny just ruins it with everybody, and he's like, don't ruin it with this cool girl. But they're both, like, super awkward about everything.
At the same time, Amar is in a hurry to get away from the two of them when the chance arises, and he can get on another boat with Joe, right? He's like, don't leave me with the new couple.
Yep, and she's like, fair. And
I thought that was probably the best joke of this episode, where it was just like, real talk. Most of this episode is surrounding the drama of running out of diesel, which they don't ever pin on Joe, but it's totally Joe's fault for leaving the hot water running in episode 2. And then they run into a dude. Actually, this guy is pretty funny too, until he's not. But his first introduction is just like, "Oh, hi guys, I'm gonna come pump up your boat full of gas."
Right.
And because he's acting completely nonchalant, and so they have to be like, wait, do you know what's going on? And then he gives them a completely succinct and accurate summation of what is going on. And
right, he's just one of those people that just kind of like keeps puttering along. But the thing is that you knew that it was going to take a turn just because he was being so reasonable and is kind of acting like there's nothing unusual happening. So after he fills their boat up and wants money, they're like, what money? Money doesn't mean anything anymore. And he's like, oh, yes, it certainly does. And so there's that whole weird thing where you're trying to reason with a totally unreasonable person. And again, they still have this... Jude has been getting more and more intense and aggressive during this whole thing. So Joe and Amar have been a bit separate from Sonny and Kat. And Sonny and Kat basically tell the little diesel guy that they have money or something like that. So he goes after them with this whole boat full of fuel.
Well, and Sonny and Kat locked in the hold or whatever. Not locked, but he's got a shotgun, and so they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I liked how, like, this all kind of, look, it's kind of, given the budget that they had for this, it's like a cool little thing. They used up their effects budget. Some of it was not very good with the fire and that kind of thing.
The explosion, it wasn't too bad.
But it was fine, and it's like... You've got, the whole Jude pursuit, but then really funny stuff that you'd normally see in other movies. They really play up the fact that, like, they cover Jude in diesel, and it doesn't light on fire, obviously. So it's just kind of funny because he's got, like, one smoldering foot or something like that. And... they blow up some of the fuel supply, and then ultimately they get out of the issue with the older dude by giving him the speedboat. There's a little bit of a solidarity between the group because in this case, basically, like, Kat had been giving Joe a hard time about separating and taking on this speedboat or this sporty boat, and in this case it actually saved them, and Joe forces an admission out of Kat that, it was a good decision. So... also in this episode is the fact that Amar is never allowed to drive.
Anything. Poor guy.
So that's a funny little thing.
Yeah, and Kat's Kat's rules are part of why Joe and I guess Amar to a slightly lesser extent are like, peace out, because Kat is strict about the apocalypse because she has all the answers, and that can get a little tired. And they don't really want to be around for the awkwardness of Kat and Sonny figuring out what they're going to do next. By the end of this episode, it's basically like hey, we might have made out, but that's nothing that we can't just say we're still friends and move on. And so I thought that was a nice grown-up way to resolve what we never got to see in the first place, which was them making out, which I don't need to see, but it's a little weird to have that all happen off screen.
Right. And... then the episodes go into sort of the wrapping up part where they have not...
Don't forget that the way that they end that episode is they give their definitely sinking little speedboat to the
Yep.
diesel guy.
Yep. And then they run into the army guys. So this is the first sort of civilization that they've seen, or some semblance of control over the whole zombie
Kat, of course,
apocalypse.
doesn't trust them because, again, she's seen a lot of zombie films, and you never trust the military. And I wasn't trusting them either, because why weren't they wearing helmets or hats?
Right. Right. They're all just kind of hanging out, and Joe's ex, who we've seen at least at the beginning, who owns the boat, Rob, shows up, and Joe had killed his girlfriend, so there was a little bit of that, and then he basically is like, "Oh, I'm so glad," because he had actually left her on the boat, knowing that she had turned and didn't want to do it. So there was that piece. And there is the whole British sort of attitude of like, oh, we've got everything under control.
Yeah,
but they don't seem...
It's definitely very skeptical about government and bureaucracy, and they've got this poor guy wearing his reflective vest, having to answer to this cynical Cat who's just like, this place is a death trap. And actually, Amar and Sunny are both... Sunny. Amar is getting completely naked and taking a nap. But Sunny is quite skeptical about it, too. And Amar accuses him of channeling Cat too much. But it turns out she's right. And Sunny is watching how this all goes badly.
Right, and I mean, even the little, like, I'm going to call him the traffic guard army guy, because that's kind of what he feels like. But he's like, oh yeah, we should put up beacons to attract more survivors. And they're like, no, that is not a good idea. And then it all comes to light that they were trying to track patient zero, who they thought was Jude.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes out that Joe was actually part of this whole flu trial that was the root cause of all of this. And that the whole outbreak began at the bar that she had been and had mentioned a couple of times the evening before. And, there is like a nice little sort of like when the group, because basically Kat and Joe are separated from Sunny and Amar, and when everything starts to go to hell in a handbasket, both the two pairs both are like, oh, we can't leave without the other pair.
Yeah.
So, and that was kind of a nice thing. And, again, it's like they kind of meet up with outsiders, but then have to kind of escape together, and we're left with this little, like, quadrangle of people. And then they wrap up the series pretty neatly, sort of.
I mean, there's a nice monologue from Kat that's still like talking about how much danger there is in front of them. Mm-hmm. But I feel like there's a chance for it to keep going. But you think it's over?
I think they're just going to leave it at this. I can't see them continuing.
Yeah,
they probably did the most interesting pieces of this. So, as it turns out, Joe is patient zero, and she probably has the cure because she's bitten, but she's not showing symptoms. And every man she kisses turns into a zombie.
Even. Yeah.
I know, crazy. I know. Good. So Amar, very good that they didn't go down that path. But ultimately, they have to kill Rob. And they're
although they don't, do they? They show Rob at the end. He's kind of floating.
Yeah. He's floating, but they're on their boat again, and basically Joe is come to the conclusion that everything's about her, and that's sort of how they wrap the series. Which it's again, it's kind of funny because
she looks really pleased with the fact that everything is about her at the very end. There's also an amazing scene of Amar shooting a gun on full auto and missing everything except for the foot of one of the zombies. But it turns out that was all he needed to shoot, because then the zombie can't walk. Right. But amazing. And everybody knows that it's going to go badly. This is probably why he's not allowed to drive, because he's just not very coordinated.
Yep. But I really enjoyed this little series. I recommend it. I think it's a fun thing to watch. Definitely somebody who loves the genre had a big part of it, or somebody's. Yeah. And I just thought it was a lot of fun. I would be psyched if they did do something more with this. I just have a feeling they're not going to.
It does have real limitations. I think a limited series like this was the way to go. I guess part of me just hopes that they could keep it going, but yeah, it's unlikely. I think the canal boat idea is an interesting approach. Like, certainly in England, that's something that might work.
Yeah, definitely. And I like how they were not afraid to poke fun of themselves and the genre.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of fun too. So I thought the writing was pretty clever. I like the actors all together. And I also like how they didn't ship them. So they tried a little bit, but then they resolved that issue. And so I enjoyed the fact that it didn't become that kind of a show. So, so that is it, I think, for Zomboat. Anything else to add?
I guess not. Yeah, so that's the end of that. ITV2, good work. Bring us another zombie show in 2020. That would be cool. All right, so that's everything we've got on Zomboat! Exclamation point. We will be back again in about a week with we're gonna try and see if we can get our hands on Dead Earth, the bikini Thai resort zombie film. I don't know why I keep mentioning the bikinis. It's just there was more than one scene.
I see what's appealing to you, what's standing out to you.
If that was really what motivated me, we would have reviewed Zombiever by now.
That's true. But anyhow,
it's just when you fit more than one bikini into a trailer, it kind of becomes a bikini film. But that's what we're going to look at reviewing next time on Reanimated, so join us then. In the meantime, you can get a hold of us on Reanimated PCast on Twitter, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com on the Gmails, and our website with our show notes, and all links to all these trailers and other news and coronavirus scare stuff is at reanimatedpodcast.com.
And until next time, thanks for listening, and ciao.
Bye.